All right, we're on to the last passage, 42 through 52. This is a dual passage. First things first, and again, as always, make sure you're reading this little blurb at the top. It says, Passage 1 is adapted from Michael Slezak, Space Mining, The Next Gold Rush. So the first one is about space mining. Maybe that's a very lucrative career choice, per se. Whereas the second one is Passage 2 is from the editors of New Scientist, called Taming the Final Frontier. Both of these are 2013. So the second passage looks like it's about taming it. So maybe putting in some sort of laws or regulations. So they're both talking about space mining. One seems more optimistic. The other one seems more realistic. And that is pretty accurate with the main ideas. So that's why it's really important to read those first before you do any other questions. So anyway, let's start going through the questions here. Starting with 42, it says in lines 9 through 17, the author of Passage 1 mentions several companies, primarily to what? So why are we mentioning these countries? So that's what the first one's asking. So we're going to go to those lines, 9 through 17, and figure out why. Why mention these companies? So let's see what they say. So again, this is number 42, lines 9 through 17. It says, the forum comes hot on the heels of the 2012 unveiling of two asteroid mining firms. Planetary Resources of Washington says it will launch its first prospecting telescopes in 2 years. Deep Space Industries of Virginia hopes to be harvesting metals from asteroids. And then another commercial venture that sprung up in 2012, Golden Spike of Colorado, will be offering trips to the moon, including to potential lunar miners. So each company, it shows, first company is asteroid mining firms. The second company will launch telescopes, and the third one will offer trips to the moon, even for miners. So they seem to all be kind of on the heels again of the of deep space mining, but they're all doing different things. So they're mentioning them to kind of show all the different maybe companies and different opportunities that are available for these companies. So it's not all about just the mining, it's about everything that goes along with it. So anyway, that seems to be one of the reasons. And again, you got to check your answers and see which one most closely matches it. So are they noting the technological advances? It really wasn't about technological advances. They were just showing a lot of companies and what they would be doing. B says, does it provide evidence of the growing interest? Is there a growing interest in space mining? I guess. I mean, a lot of companies are trying to get involved, so that seems like that would be a growing interest. C doesn't emphasize the large profits to be made. They didn't really say that. They just said here's some companies and here's some things that they plan on doing. So maybe there's some large profits, but that's not what it's saying. D says is a highlight the diverse ways to carry out space mining operations. So this one is talking about the diverse ways to carry out these operations. It does say diverse. That does match. Diverse ways does seem to match, so I guess we're good here. But they really aren't focusing, though, on the space mining operations. So, I mean, this one is not going to work because of that second half of this answer. They're not describing how the operations are going to be run. But it does kind of show that there's coming right hot off the heels of that, what was it? The unveiling of these asteroid mining firms. All these other companies are starting to get involved as well. So it kind of shows that there is a growing interest. So B is probably going to be a better answer because I don't have any issues with B, whereas D, I have some minor issues with the way they worded the answer. So B is going to be a better answer for 42. 43 says the author of Passage 1 indicates that space mining could have which positive effect. So what is a positive effect that we can have? So again, we're going to look, this is a citing evidence one, by the way. We're going to look at our evidence and see which one describes a positive effect that space mining can have. So let's go ahead and look at our answer choices and see which one does that. So starting off with, again, we're on number 43, 44. So here we go. First one starts on line 18, says within a few decades, these firms may be meeting earthly demands. So it would be meeting earthly demands for precious metals, such as platinum and gold, and the rare earth elements vital for personal electronics. So again, we're trying to think of positive effects. I guess that is a positive effect. We can meet the demands for all these precious metals. That would be positive, so I'd keep that one. B says they also hope to build an off-planet economy free of any bonds with Earth, in which the materials extracted and processed from the moon and asteroids are delivered for space-based projects. Again, same thing here. I mean, that seems like that could be a positive effect. You're gonna, you're trying to build an off-planet economy. So I'd keep that as a potential as well. C says in this scenario, water mined from other worlds could become the most desired commodity. That's not necessarily a positive effect. That is an effect. That's something that may happen, but I wouldn't necessarily say it has to be positive. So I would not keep C. And the last one, 43 is at the very end. Companies are eyeing the iron, silicone, and aluminum and lunar soil and asteroids, which could be used in 3D printers. Again, is that a positive effect? That is an effect. Maybe it's positive. It's very specific. So I would at least at this point get rid of C for my evidence. That's not going to match. So when you look at the rest of these answers, we are meeting demands. And again, you don't have to write these down. I'm just kind of reminding you what we're looking at. We have all these different positive effects. So that one is meeting demands. I remember D said about 3D printers. It's very specific. And then B, trying to remember what that one was again. Building an off-planet economy. So when you look at these three, so you're going to build an economy. We want to see which one would most represent a positive effect. Building an off-planet economy, again, I don't know if that's necessarily a positive thing. It's just something that would happen. So I wouldn't say that's positive. Meeting demands, you're meeting the Earth's demands for a metal. That seems to be pretty positive. So I would keep A, get rid of B. D says something positive as well. Very specific, though. You're talking about just a certain types of positive effects, not earthly demands. So I say A is a little bit more positive. Not that I'd get rid of D, but I'm going to be looking for A unless there's nothing there. And then maybe D would end up being right, but it's not. But anyway, the answers say it could yield materials important to Earth's economy. Well, I mean, meeting earthly demands could yield materials that are important to their economy because they're earthly demands for precious metals. So A and A seem to be matching here. B says it could raise the value of some precious metals on Earth. Maybe it could. More likely, it'd probably bring the prices down because the demand would be met. So probably not going to be B. It could create unanticipated technological innovations. Now this would probably go with D. If you look at these two, and that's great. But again, I'm thinking more earthly demands is probably going to be a more positive effect than just 3D printers. And then D says it could change scientists' understanding of space resources. Again, that doesn't seem to match any of our answers either. So even though I'm picking A and A, C and D could be right, but we're trying to say which is the best answer, and A is going to be probably the best answer. It's more of a positive effect. You're literally meeting the Earth's demand for something. That's pretty positive. So that's going to be 43 and 44. 45, what function does the discussion of water in lines 35 through 40 serve in passage 1? So what function does this serve? So why are they mentioning this discussion? So let's go and see. Why are they mentioning this discussion on water? What purpose does it serve? So here we go. Water ice from the moon's poles could be sent to astronauts on the International Space Station for drinking or as a radiation shield. Splitting water into oxygen and hydrogen makes spacecraft fuel. So ice-rich asteroids could become interplanetary refueling stations. So it looks like they're describing the myriad of uses for water. It could be used for drinking, shields, fuel, all sorts of cool stuff. So they're trying to show how diverse water is, I guess. So in this case, notice the answer choices here. It continues. It provides an unexpected answer to a question raised in the previous paragraph. So maybe I should also check that previous paragraph to get the context, because it looks like the answers are wanting me to do that. So we've read 35 through 40, but let's remind ourselves, what is this first the paragraph before saying? So in this scenario, I'm looking right here on line 29, water mined from other worlds could become the most desired commodity. So water most desired. In the desert, water's worth more. Or in the desert, what's worth more, a kilogram of gold or a kilogram of water? And they say gold is useless, water is what will let you live. So it looks like they're saying water is important, and then I think in this next paragraph they explain to you how it's important, how it could be used more than just something for you to drink and live with. It kind of expands on that. So I'd say it really, again, it expands on the statement made in the previous paragraph. Now that I know it's related to the previous paragraph, so here I go. Now that I know that, does it continue an extended comparison that begins in the previous paragraph? I mean, I would say it does do some continuing, so I would at least keep that. You will later, I have to kind of compare this next part where it says extended comparison. I'm not sure as much about that, but I'll keep A. B says it provides an unexpected answer to a question. Now, I want to say there's no unexpected answer here. It kind of really continued, so I would get rid of B. It offers a hypothetical examples. Here, those were hypothetical. Those things aren't happening yet. Supporting a claim. You're going to support a claim that water is important, made in the previous paragraph. So I like that way better now. I'm getting rid of C. I like it enough to get rid of A. Actually, not get rid of C. And D says it examines possible outcomes of a proposal. That wasn't really a proposal in the previous paragraph. It's more of a claim. You're just kind of saying water is going to be important. That's a claim that was made, and it's giving hypothetical examples. So C is going to be a better answer. So that's going to be number 46. Next, 47 says the central claim of passage 2. So notice we've now moved on to passage 2. So the central claim is that space mining has positive potential, but. Now, this does say central claim. However, it goes in to some detail here. Space mining has positive potential, but then they say the word but. Now, I want to look here because they are being kind of specific. Can I figure out by reading the start of this paragraph what that but is? And obviously the answer to that is yes, you can. But to give you an idea of where you can find that, well, it's got to be before line 48. Again, if this is a lead word question, then 48 is going to be after the evidence for number 47. So you'll look at how I have this marked. On 47, I have that everything up to line 68 is marked. Doesn't mean it's going to be all in that section, but somewhere in there is probably going to be the answer. So again, the question is asking, it has positive space mining. It does have positive potential, but. So I'm looking I see words like here, like the word but right there, but right here. So again, as I read, I'm probably going to find this pretty quickly. So I want to see what the but is. So the motivation for deep space travel, I'm right at the beginning, is shifting from discovery to economics. The past year has been a flurry of proposals aimed at bringing celestial riches down to Earth. No doubt this will make a few billionaires even wealthier. So there's some positive potential. There's money. But we all stand to gain, so it's still kind of positive. The mineral bounty and spin-off technologies could enrich us all. So right now that first paragraph is saying this is going to be great. Now we need to pay attention. But before the miners start firing up the rockets, we should pause for thought. At first glance, space mining seems to sidestep most environmental concerns. There's probably no life on asteroids, and thus no habitats to trash. But its consequences, both here on Earth, merit careful consideration. So its consequences merit consideration. So at this point, we need to think about the consequences of just shooting up into space and mining stuff. So that's what we really need to think about, and that's the but. So now that I see that, what the author is saying, Now I can check my answers and see which one will most closely match it. So it will end up encouraging humanity's reckless treatment of the environment. Encouraging them, I don't know if it encourages. They didn't say that. There is parts of this that's right, but again, remember certain words, they don't fit. Please don't pick the answer. So it's not A. Its effects should be thoughtfully considered. I think he's more on the thoughtfully considered boat and not saying it's going to encourage it before it becomes reality. So we need to think about the effects. That is mentioned. So I will keep B. C says such potential may not include replenishing key resources that are disappearing on Earth. That's not mentioned at all. D says experts disagree about the commercial viability of the discoveries it could yield, and that wasn't mentioned at all either. So it really comes down between A and B, but like I said, the encouraging part doesn't fit, so B is going to be your better answer for 47. So that brings me to 48. As used in line 68, hold most nearly means. Very simple question to understand what it's asking, so let's go ahead and read. And again, hold shows up in line 68. We may potentially have to read a few lines before or after to see what it actually means. So let's go ahead and check that out. So line 68. Actually, start on line 67. We'll get the whole sentence in context here. History suggests that those will be hard lines to hold. So here at this point, the sentence before, I guess I'll read that so we can get the perspective here. So others will suggest that glutting ourselves on space's riches is not an acceptable alternative to developing more sustainable ways of earthly life. So we have this, they just want to go and make money in space. It's not an acceptable alternative just to go do that and not develop more sustainable ways to kind of live good here. So history suggests that those will be hard lines to hold. I would say something like maybe maintain. So again, you want, and I think I probably gave the answer away, but that just seems to be the best word that fits for me when I read this. We're trying to figure out what word would fit in context of this sentence, and then you keep reading it. It may be difficult to persuade the public that such barren environments are worth preserving. So again, we have this hard line that we want to try to maintain where, don't go up and just destroy things. And that's going to be hard for people to consider when they see all that money up there. And they just want to go get it. So again, trying to maintain that line is going to be very hard, and you just want to find the word that closely matches it, which, that is actually answer choice A. It does seem to match it the best. But again, remember, read a few lines before and after it and see what word would fit without looking at the answer choices. Again, that's the best way to do that, because the answer choices may sway you to pick something that's not actually true. So try to get that word yourself before you check. So that's 48. 49 says, which statement best describes the relationships between the passages? So in this one, we have to, at this point, have understood the main ideas for both passages. Passage 1 is, again, more positive. He's saying all the good things that can come from space mining. And passage 2 is more realistic. It's saying that there have to be some regulations that get put in place. So they kind of agree that it could be positive, but again, the author passage 2 is more realistic about it. So passage 2 refutes the central claim. I would say when you're looking at these two passages, I want to say they're arguing. So this word refute doesn't seem to fit. It's not really an argument. It's more of a more realistic approach to a situation. So I would not pick A because of that word refute. Passage 2 illustrates the phenomenon. Is he illustrating? I want to say he's illustrating it, described in more general terms, so it's not an illustration either. Again, he is in agreement that it could be good, but he's, again, having a realistic approach to it. C, passage 2 argues against the practicality, maybe, of the proposals put forth. Again, I would say this practicality is what makes this wrong, but it's kind of a tricky one. You may have kept it. So when you look at D, we'll compare. Passage 2 expresses reservations. about developments discussed in passage 1. This one seems to fit. He's more having reservations. He's not really discussing if it's possible or not. So see, if you understand what those words mean, you'll see that reservations is a little bit better of a word to describe how passage 2 is being written and discussed. So D is going to be a better answer because it's not about the practicality, it's about concerns, and that's really all it is. So that's 49. 49 is D. Number 50 and 51. The author of passage 2 would most likely respond to the discussion of the future of space mining in lines 18 through 28 by claiming that such a future. So let's figure out what that future is. So line 18 through 28, I'm going to read those lines first. And that's this paragraph. We've kind of read it already with number 43, as you can see. So I'll just kind of summarize it in case you didn't go through that question yet. But here they're talking about meeting earthly demands on various precious metals. But then he says later, like gold rush pioneers who transformed the Western United States, the first space miners won't just enrich themselves, they also hope to build an off-planet economy free of any bonds, and this is key if you've read passage 2 already, which you should have, free of any bonds with Earth, in which the materials extracted and processed from the moon asteroids are delivered for space-based projects. So we're talking about having their own off-planet economy, free of any bonds. Now, the author of passage 2 is big on having some control. There's got to be some control out in space. We don't want this wild frontier, as the title suggests. So he would probably be against that. So what we want to do is you say, by claiming that such a future, I would probably be able to answer this just by looking at these right now. So like, will be difficult, cannot be attained, seems certain to affect in a negative way. If you look at these, you might be able to kind of guesstimate your answer, but let's just kind of go at it this way. It's going to be easier to answer if we actually have the evidence right in front of us. So I know the response, he's going to be talking about having a space mining where everyone can just do whatever they want is not a good idea. So we need to see when he's discussing that topic so we can find our evidence. So as you go through your lines for 50 and 51, we want to see which one's responding to that. So starting off with A, talking about, again, having no bonds or no restrictions in space. When's he responding to that statement? So part of this is about principles. Some will argue that space's magnificent desolation is not ours to despoil, just as they argue that our own planet's poles should remain pristine. This is not talking about having no laws. So it's not going to be answer choice A. Answer choice B says the resources that are valuable in orbit and beyond may be very different to those we prize on Earth. And again, more so we are responding to the fact that there's no rules. And what's that going to mean if we can have no rules? That's not really responding to that either, so B is going to be incorrect. But you may have kept it. So we'll discuss that in a little bit because there are things talking about the resources and things like that. So I'll keep it as a potential, as you'll see later. C says one speaker at last week's Space Mining Forum in Sydney, Australia concluded with the plea that regulation should be avoided. Now here, that's not necessarily what he feels. And be aware, just because a statement is made by some person, some speaker, that goes against, this is not the author, and that is not their opinion. If you've read this passage, you know he thinks regulation should not be avoided. We should have regulation. So this is actually the opposite. So we do not want to pick that. Be wary of that answer. And then lastly, without consensus, claims will be disputed, investments risky, and the gains made insecure. It is in all of our long-term interest to seek one out. So here he's talking about having some rules in place. It's in everyone's best interest to do so. So this one is the best piece of evidence. So again, as I go through my answer choices here, I'm getting rid of A and C. Remember, I kept B, even though, again, it's not going to be right. But let's look at our answer choices and saying, now that we know, claiming it's such a future, a future where you have no rules in place, that's not a good one to have. Is it inconsistent with the sustainable use of space resources? This one, let's discuss that in a second because we are talking about resources, but it has nothing to do with what I already stated as our proper piece of evidence. So it's not going to be correct. B says will be difficult to bring about in the absence of regulations. It will be difficult if you have no regulations. So those things that he's talking about in passage 1, it's going to be hard to make that thing come true if you don't have regulations in place. So this is going to be good. Cannot be attained without technologies. We're not talking about technologies. Cannot be attained is pretty strong as well. So C is not it. Seems certain to affect. This is another strong word. It seems certain to affect Earth's economy in a negative way. Again, it's not really stating that either. So B is going to be our answer. As I said, when you're looking at the other piece of evidence, if you picked, for instance, and by the way, this was D. I didn't circle that yet. If you picked B, that's if you're focusing on the resources. But notice the question. It says by claiming that such a future. So we're thinking about the future where you're able to do these things, to get those resources. Well, that future was one that requires, according to passage 1, doesn't require, but one that includes having no regulations. So it's really about that entire context. The entire context is that you can meet these earthly demands for these precious metals by space mining, and when you're space mining, you're up there with no regulations and not having to worry about them. And that future is going to be hard to bring about, and that's really going to make it more of a better answer in this scenario. So that's why 50 is going to be B and then D for 51. 52, which point about the resources that will be highly valued in space is implicit in passage 1, which means implied, and explicit in passage 2, which means it was clearly expressed. Now this is all main idea. Once you get to this point, you're doing your compare contrast questions, and again, this is just going to be you hopefully have read the passage and So implied and clearly expressed. So we'll look through each answer choice based on what we've read and see which one best matches it. So A says they may be different. Resources. So we're talking about which point about the resources. So A says they may be different resources from those that are valuable on Earth. So here they're implying it. I would focus on the ones that we know were expressed. And in passage 2, they specifically stated there are different resources that are valuable on Earth. They actually mention them up here. So if you're looking at passage 2 and you're trying to find it, and if you look down here, somewhere around this paragraph, starting on line 73, he literally says somewhere in here, there we go. So starting around line 75 and 74, the resources that are valuable in orbit and beyond may be very different to those we prize on Earth. He says it explicitly. He says they're going to be different. That statement was never actually made in passage 1, although he does talk about water and things like that, meeting earthly demands. So, obviously, if gold is all over the place, up in space maybe, then, that's obviously a resource that's not as abundant on Earth. So they may have different resources. There may be different resources that are valuable on Earth. The resources in space are going to be different. So that does match pretty good. Next, they said the resources will be valuable only if, I don't like that word only if, they can be harvested cheaply. So I'm not going to go with B because it's too strong a language anyway. C says they are likely to be primarily precious metals. Again, that would be explicitly stated. It seems like more than implicitly stated in passage 1, but they don't really mention that in passage 2 anyway. So I wouldn't pick it regardless, so that's going to be incorrect. And they may increase in value. Now, here, the increasing in value, if you look at passage 1, they mention how we're going to meet earthly demands. So that would actually probably bring the prices down instead of increasing them anyway. So D is not going to be the best answer anyway. So in this case, 52, it does hit everything. You can tell it was implied in passage 1. It was clearly expressed in passage 2. So 52 is going to be A.